Hey guys, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to do a transmission service on this 2004 Volvo XC90 T6. So before we get started on this transmission service, there are a few things we're going to need. Besides the obvious, this is the funnel that we're going to fill it with, and then our transmission fluid. But I would like to use my 1/4" drive ratchet, this long extension, this 10mm wobbly socket that goes on the extension for removing the bolts, and I like to use this short extension and this deep 10 to get the bolt started. It really helps just get things going, because when the bolts are covered in oil they get slippery, and this helps get them nice and started. And then you go over with these and tighten them all down, and once that's all tight, you fill it with fluid. All right, let's get to it. So on the T6 version, as I mentioned in the last video on the other transmission service we did, this one has a totally different transmission. It has the 4T65E that is commonly found in General Motors vehicles like Cadillacs and the bigger front-wheel drive vehicles. Somehow Ford owned Volvo when this car was made, and somehow GM slipped a transmission in there. Kind of one of the mysteries over the ages. But this one's pretty straightforward. From the top we have our dipstick here we're going to pull out. That's how you check the level, so it's pretty simple to check. And it's also, this tube is also how you fill it. So we're going to put a funnel in there, and that's how we're going to fill it. So let's go underneath and we'll show you how to get started. And always remember to block the wheels and give yourself plenty of room, because it is pretty involved if you're doing it on your back on the floor. So just be careful of that. And let's put it up in the air and see what we So here we are under the car. We have it up in the air now for ease of filming. We're using a lift, makes it a lot easier, but if you want to use jack stands or drive-on ramps, that works too. But this is the transmission pan. There's no drain plug whatsoever in this, so we have to do what's called a controlled spill. That involves removing all of these bolts and letting the pan kind of come down, and the fluid will pour over the sides, and then you unbolt more bolts, and then it comes out more and more until the pan is angled down at a steep angle. So with that being said, these two bolts right here in the corner, because of the subframe design, are extremely difficult to get to. So those are the first two that we pull out, because right now they'll come out easier. They're still kind of hard to get to. And then we'll move to the front and we'll start pulling the pan off. So we're going to start out, and we're going to use our 10mm wobbly and a long extension, and we're going to put it on this one in the corner first. It's really hard to get to. We're going to crack it loose, and then you have to work it kind of out with your fingers or a wrench. I find double fingers works pretty well. We'll get this one out, and then we're going to go ahead and do the other one the same way, but this one you can actually use the tool on it. So get that out of the way, and then we'll move over here to the front and show you that spill. So as you can see here, I've pulled out the first probably 10 bolts or 6 bolts or whatever it is, and it's starting to drip. So I'm just going to go one side at a time, from this side to this side, and we're just going to see how much we can get to come out. Eventually it'll all come out. We're just going to work back and forth. Pretty soon it'll really start to come out, right about here usually. More and more. Here it comes now. Now this last one, there it goes. We're just going to let it drain out like that. We're going to catch it. And as soon as it slows down, we'll get the back bolts. There's about 5 more on the back of the pan that we'll get. Then the pan will come straight down and straight off, and we'll have access to the filter. These last 2 bolts are holding the back of the pan on. And if you turn really carefully, you can tip the pan down further and get more of a spill to get more of the fluid out. Be very careful, and at this point you can hold the pan up and remove both of the bolts, the last two, and remove the pan if this cooperates. No, of course not. Come on now. I decided to go with the power tools because it's a little bit easier on the wrist. Okay, so now we're going to take, with two hands, very carefully, lower the pan down, walk it out past the subframe, come down, and there it is. And this is our filter right here. And it's not bolted in, it's just held in by an O-ring or a seal. You just have to kind of wiggle and twist. And it should come out. Sometimes you have to use a little pry bar to help wiggle it out. Give it a little bit of a pry. And it's in there. All right. Good work. And that little seal, it sure is working. All right, so we have our new filter in. I fought a little bit coming out, but we were able to pry it this corner and wiggle, and it finally came out. So at this point, we're gonna wipe down the pan rail, make sure we get a good, nice seal with the gasket. We'll take our new pan, or our pan, and our new gasket. We're gonna slide it up here into place. And I like to get two bolts started so I can start all the other bolts and tighten them down. So I'm try and get one that's easier to get to, and if possible on the other side. Sometimes the front's easier to get to, and you want to make sure you're going through the pan, the hole in the pan, and the hole in the filter or the gasket. And with that set up like that, all the other holes should be lined right up, and you can get them all started by hand. And then we'll go through and tighten them all down with our tools here. So let me get this going, and then we'll get back in just a second here and tighten them all down. So the pan is back on, and now we're going to tighten down all the bolts. They're all just kind of hand tight right now, but we're going to go around and get them all nice and snug. And there really isn't a, well, I guess there is a torque spec somewhere, but really the rule of thumb is we're going to go in a circle all the way around and getting them as tight as we can, and then we'll double check and make sure they're all nice and snug and tight. Well, now that we have the pan on, we went around and double checked everything twice. We're going to put our filter in and start filling it up. Now this transmission takes a lot more fluid than you would think. I always start out, I add 6 quarts right away, and then I'll start it and run it and check it from there. They can hold 7 to 8 quarts sometimes. A lot more comes out than you think. So I would start with 6 and then start it, let it run through the gears, you know, park to reverse, and into drive, and into reverse, and back into park, and then we'll let it idle. And then we'll double check to see where the level is at and add or subtract if we have to, but we're going to be very careful and start with a lower amount so we don't have to take any back out, and go from there. Let's see what happens. So just a few things to remember when you're doing this service. Just make sure when you're putting the pan bolts back in that they thread in nice and easy, and you're not forcing them. If you force them, you can cross thread, and cross threading is bad. So all of them should all go in nice and easy. And then after you do your second round of tightening, make sure they're all nice and tight. You add your fluid and you're running it, make sure there's no leaks. And lastly, after you make sure it's not leaking, these dipsticks right here, they're kind of hard to read sometimes. So always just dip 2 to 3 times to make sure you have the level correct, and then go drive it and make sure it shifts nice and smooth, and you should be good to go. All right, guys, As always, there's more than one way to do things, but consider this way. And if you have any questions, please send me a message, let me know. Have a good day. Thanks.